Hello my dear friends, you're on the Military Summary channel, and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine on the 29th of February of 2024. Today we have a lot of very interesting updates and details, so let's start. And first we're going to talk about the city by the name of Krasnogorovka. According to information we have, and as you know, yesterday the Russians conducted a very successful operation. At least we received yesterday the geolocation of that operation, and as a result of that offensive the Russians managed to enter the village itself and to establish a stable foothold in the southeastern part of the city. And according to information we have, the Ukrainians during the previous 24 hours made, or 48 hours, made a lot of attempts to counterattack with the purpose to force the Russians to fall back. Let's take a look at the video of Russian assault once again. On this video we can see the movements of Russian tanks and armored vehicles. The Russians were using up to 4 or maybe more armored vehicles in that operation, probably 2 tanks and 3 personnel carriers. The Russians managed to reach the outskirts of the city, of the southern part, to land the infantry and to capture a few buildings. After that, the Russians launched the clearing operation. Later, we got a lot of updates from the Ukrainian sources. They were saying that they launched the clearing operation, that the Ukrainians attacked this area with the 3rd Azov Brigade that was recently defeated and almost collapsed in the vicinity of Avdiivka. And according to information we have, the Ukrainians made few attempts to attack the Russians, and also the Ukrainians are saying that they managed to force the Russians to fall back. If you ask my opinion, I can't tell you for sure whether the Ukrainians were successful or not, but we have just one geolocation. This is the video of Ukraine counterattack. I have a lot of questions after watching this video. The Ukrainians are saying that this is the video of their counterattack, and as a result of this counterattack, they managed to force the Russians to fall back. If we take a look at this video, if you ask my opinion, the only thing I can see is how the Ukrainians of 3rd Azov Brigade were throwing grenades into the empty basements and empty buildings. So I can't tell you for sure whether they managed to clear this area or not. And when talking about the geolocations, the edge positions the Ukrainian forces of 3rd Brigade managed to clear was this building. So if we take a look at this map, we see that the main Russian positions are located further to the south of the settlement, along Shkolnaya Street and Shevchenko Street. So regarding the published video from 3rd Azov Brigade, very likely that the Russians still control this territory. And even if the Russians were forced to fall back, because there are also chances of that, the Russians made an ambush for the 3rd Azov Brigade, and after 3rd Brigade Azov entered this territory, the Russians covered this area with significant number of tall flamethrower systems. Anyway, for now, when talking about the battle for Krasnogorovka, of course, such a battles like Krasnogorovka can't be resolved during one day. Obviously, the Russians entered the village, they tried to create a foothold, they created some mines, some traps, maybe established some equipment, and after that they fell back because of due to lack of ammo or due to complete absence of support from artillery or aviation. The Ukrainians launched counteroffensive, the Ukrainians entered the area, and now we see what happened after with these territories. So for now, we're not going to adjust the map for many reasons, and the most important that we don't have geolocations confirming Ukrainian control, but anyway, the clashes for the territory continues. From the other side, we got additional videos from the Russians. For example, on this video, we can see destroyed Ukrainian tank, probably of 3rd Azov Brigade, that they were using trying to counterattack the Russians. The tank was probably destroyed with FPV drone. A little bit further to the west, we got another video of how the Russians managed to discover another Ukrainian tank. In this case, the Russians destroyed T-72 tank, obviously also the tank of 3rd Azov Brigade that Ukrainians sent in this direction with the purpose to counterattack the Russians. A little bit further to the north, on the Ukrainian side of the railways, we got the video of how the Russians managed to discover the Ukrainian evacuation machine, and as a result of fire, that evacuation machine was destroyed as well. So as we can see, everything at least on this stage of the operation remains and seems like an ambush against the Ukrainian forces in the southern part. Also, we got another video of use of FAP-1500. The Russians continue using the tactics they used in Avdiivka in Krasnogorovka. As a result of the strike, we see significant explosion. Very likely the Russians were targeting the main headquarters or command centers in this area, and as a result of that attack, very likely the Russians managed to deal significant damage. Furthermore, regarding the clashes on the ground, the Russians also tried to suppress the Ukrainian artillery forces. On this video, we see the Russians destroyed the Ukrainian local ammo depot somewhere to the northwest of Krasnogorovka. In the fields between Krasnogorovka and Nevelske, Nevelske, we got few additional destroyed artillery systems. On this video, the Russians destroyed anti-tank artillery system MT-12, and a little bit further to the west, another Ukrainian howitzer D-20. Both artillery systems were destroyed as a result of the strike of Russian Lancet, of Russian drone Lancet. Also, in addition to the main attack, in addition to the main clashes that currently are taking place to the south, on the southern part of Krasnogorovka, the Russians during the previous 24 hours conducted another offensive operation with the purpose to establish control over the Ukrainian positions in the fields between Krasnogorovka, Georgievka and Marinka. So that attack was conducted also by a significant number of armored vehicles. Up to 5 armored vehicles the Russians used in that operation, probably also 2 tanks and 3 personnel carriers with infantry on board. The Ukrainians during that attack tried to slow down the Russians with significant number of FPV drones. Some of armored vehicles were damaged, some of them were destroyed and abandoned by the Russians, but most of the forces managed to reach the outskirts and the edge positions in this area. So as you can see, the Russians made 2 attacks, the first one to the north in Krasnogorovka with the purpose to establish control over the residential area to the south of the railways, and the second attack was conducted in direction of the trenches between the villages Krasnogorovka, Marinka and Georgievka with the purpose to establish control over this territory, to maintain the gray zone and to improve their positions on this line of combat contact. But we can't say about, let's say, complete Krasnogorovka operation without one important attack that should take place in Nevelske, and today the Russians published a lot of updates from the territory, yet we haven't received even a single geolocate confirmation. But according to reliable mappers, let's say at 2 a.m. of the local time, the Russians managed to establish control over additional fields and to go as close as possible to the village itself. So that was the configuration of the line of combat contact at 2 a.m. of the local time. Later, at 11 a.m. of the same day, of the 29th of February, the Russians published additional maps showing additional progress of the Russian forces. And according to additional progress, the Russians managed to reach the outskirts of the village by the name of Nevelske. And as I understand, the situation in this area was the same as we just saw in Krasnogorovka. First, the Russians entered the territory with the purpose to, to discover the situation, to conduct reconnaissance operation. The Russians managed to collect as much as possible information, and very likely later the Russians abandoned their positions back to the 3 lines under their control. And after that, after they collected information, very likely the next few days we need to wait, we should expect another and very powerful Russian offensive with the purpose to establish complete control over the village and basically to start creation operational encirclement of Krasnogorovka area. Because from Nevelske area, as we discussed in the previous videos, the Russians have chances and have possibilities, nice possibilities to start movements further to the west with the purpose to cut the main supply road that goes from, let's say, Kurakhova, or let's say fortification, Kurakhova agglomeration towards Krasnogorovka. If the Russians are able to cut the road, then we can start counting days of Krasnogorovka, because they will be numbered, obviously. Now we are moving to Avdiivka direction. We have lots of updates, and I would like to discuss with you one important topic. Important topic because the most important, and the topic that will determine the future of the battle for Avdiivka and Donetsk as well. According to the Ukrainians, during the previous 24 hours, they managed to shot down additional 2 Su-34 on Avdiivka and Donetsk direction. And this is very important because the Russians managed to achieve superiority. The Russians managed to achieve results, such as significant results in Avdiivka, Krasnogorovka, Orlovka, Chiretina, Lastochkina, Toninka, Berdych, Stepovo, and the fields, just due because of massive use of Su-35, Su-34 with guided bombs, FABs, CAPs, and different types of aviation bombs. And the thing is that the Ukrainians, according to their reports, during the previous 20 days, as I remember, correct me if I'm wrong, reported about destroying of 12 Russian aircraft Su-34. So during the Russian greatest offensive operation in the vicinity of Avdiivka, on Avdiivka and Donetsk direction, according to the Ukrainians, the Russians lost up to 12 Su-34 air bombers and airplanes. This is a very big number. We understand that this is a very big number. From the other side, the Russians, for example, published the video of the line of the group of Su-34 from Donetsk Avdiivka direction, saying that everything is okay with us. No, we haven't lost any pilot since the beginning of the special military operation, and just in this line we can count up to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, maybe more than 15 Su-34 on this direction. So they're saying that everything's well. Of course, it's up to you who to believe, the Russians or the Ukrainians, but if you ask my opinion, I'll repeat one important note. That the Russians managed to achieve significant results on this direction to establish control over all these towns, all these buildings, to destroy a significant number of buildings in deep near rear, like in Pokrovsk, Selidova, to destroy the temporary positions of the Ukrainian forces just because of use of Su-34 and with aviation bombs. So that's why the Russians are forced, the Russian pilots are forced to fly as close as possible to the line of combat contact. And to tell the truth, the chances that Ukrainians have chances to bring down another Russian plane is very high. I'm not saying that the Ukrainians managed to do this, but something tells me that maybe the Russians are not telling us the real truth and the 100% truth. Probably the losses, there is a losses, but maybe less than 12 planes during the previous 20 days. Furthermore, we got a very interesting video from Toretsk-Dzержinsk direction. According to information we have, the Russians during the previous 24 hours or 48 hours managed to discover another Ukrainian S-300 system, air defense system, and as a result of Tornado S strike, that system was destroyed. So we have at least an evidence that Ukrainians did concentrate a significant number of air defense forces along the line of combat contact on Donetsk-Avdiivka direction. And once again, the chances that they managed to shut down or to bring down a few Russian planes are very high. But from the other side, we see that the Russians destroyed that S-300 system. When talking about the main defense belt that goes through Berdichi, Orlovka and Toninka, the Russians managed to break through this territory, and basically the second defense line of armed forces of Ukraine collapsed under the Russian pressure. Furthermore, we got additional information that on Avdiivka direction, the Russians managed to discover another Ukrainian Abrams tank and to destroy it. Yet we haven't received a normal geolocated confirmations with very good quality from normal angle of destroyed tanks, but they were destroyed, but we don't have just normal picture, good picture, and obviously soon the Russians will publish the good picture. Probably they have it, maybe they're waiting for something, so let's see. Anyway, the clashes on Avdiivka direction are very heavy. According to information we have, as a result of clashes on this direction, the Ukrainians lost 495 soldiers just during the previous 24 hours. When talking about entire Donetsk direction, that includes not just Krasnogorovka, also Ivanovska and Bakhmut, Artyomovsk direction, the Ukrainians lost 600 soldiers. So basically, since the beginning of this year, the Ukrainians today on the 29th of February had the biggest losses ever since the beginning of the year. They lost more than 103,000 soldiers. Very powerful attacks under Russian pressure and so on. And if we compare the losses of February and January, we can make a conclusion that for just 29 days of February, and February is less than January for 2 days, the Ukrainians lost 27,670 soldiers, and during the previous month 23,000. So we see that the level of losses has been increased significantly under the Russian pressure. When talking about the towns and the situation on the ground, according to information we have, the Russians managed to establish complete control over the village by the name of Toninka and to reach the first outskirts of the second defense belt on this direction. According to information we have, the Russians managed to establish complete control over the village by the name of Orlovka and to get the water reservoirs that located on the western part of the village. We haven't received any geolocations confirming this, but most of the sources confirm this. And we have report that the Russians, as a result of offensive operation, managed to establish complete control over Berdichi. Some sources are saying that there are still clashes, but as I understand, there is a clearing operation. We have one geolocated video confirming the Russian presence inside of the Berdichi. At least the author of this video tells that this is the drone that was following the Russian soldiers and helping them to operate on this direction, to helping them to telling them where are the Ukrainian positions, where are the Ukrainian drones, and so on. So we have some evidence of Russian progress. From the other side, we have and we start receiving updates of Russian artillery superiority, Russian artillery strikes against the Ukrainian positions on the, let's say, on the Ukrainian side of the second defense belt. I'll remind you what I'm talking about and what is the second defense belt. This is Ocheretina, former Berdichi positions, Semyonovka, former Orlovka positions, Umanska, Yasnobrodovka, and Karlovka water reservoir. So this is the second defense belt, and as you can see, we start receiving updates about artillery bombings of Ukrainian positions in this area. On this video, for example, we see that the Russians managed to discover the Ukrainian FPV drone position, and as a result of artillery strike, to destroy it. So this is the strike. Furthermore, we got the video or geolocated video of FPV drone strike against the Ukrainian Bradley. Bradley was moving somewhere from Semyonovka towards Berdichi, probably to support Ukrainian offensive defense forces, but as a result of FPV drone strike, that armored vehicle was stopped and probably destroyed. And we have additional videos of bombing of Ukrainian positions on between Orlovka and Umanska, and on these positions we see another strike, probably against the Ukrainian forces along the tree lines. Furthermore, according to information we have, the Russians managed to establish complete control of the main supply roads that goes to Semyonovka from the south and from Berdichi on the north. And according to some sources, one Ukrainian group located on the Russian bank of these water reservoirs was ambushed and got into cauldron. We can't tell for sure the exact number of Ukrainian forces there, but probably there are up from 50 till 200 soldiers was encircled and currently don't have possibilities for evacuation. They can use this road, but obviously this short road, small road, is under complete Russian artillery and FPV drone control. So this is the situation on Donetsk and Avdiivka directions. Now we are moving further to Bakhmut, Artyomovsk direction, and today we start receiving significant number of details and updates from the area between Toretsk and Gorlovka. And this evening, the Russians are saying that as a result of offensive operation, the Russians managed to cross the fields and to establish control over the first streets of the village by the name of Druzhba. So this is the city by the name of Druzhba or town. The Russians conducted offensive operation probably along the railways, or maybe the Russians attacked the Ukrainians from Mayorsk, let's say on the northern, using the northern road, or maybe the Russians attack from Gorlovka through Shumy also here. So according to the Russians, the first streets were captured. It's like this polygon was added softly. I can't tell you for sure what exactly is under control, but something big is brewing on this direction. When talking about Bakhmut-Ivanovska area today, for the first time since the beginning of the battle for the territory, we got update from Arkhangel Spetsnaz, Russian, very reliable source about the fall of the village, that the Russians established complete control. A few hours later, they published like additional information that the previous information wasn't confirmed, and that there are still heavy clashes inside of the village. But obviously the clashes are taking place there, and the Russians are pushing and forcing the Ukrainians to fall back. So I have adjusted the map showing this entire territory in the gray zone, because currently it's very difficult to understand which street is under which control. Furthermore, the Russians continue bombing and attacking the main hill that located to the northwest of the village, the hill that Ukrainians used to control the entire situation. And the previous 24 hours, this territory was under very heavy fire of by flamethrower systems. Furthermore, we got additional updates of destroyed ammo depots on the southwestern part of the village as well. The Russians managed to discover a local ammo depot, and as a result of FPV drone strike, that ammo depot was destroyed. So that's it about Bakhmut-Artyomovsk direction. Now we are moving to Belogorovka area, and today, probably for the previous few days, we got the first geolocated confirmation of Russian additional progress on this territory. We have already adjusted the map. We have the FPV drone strike that confirms the Russian progress. Yet the Russians haven't entered the central part or residential part of the area, haven't managed to split the territory in two parts, but very likely the Russians are about to start this. We haven't received anything from the southern and northern Kupiansk direction, and the operational pause on this direction continues. Furthermore, we got, let's move back to Urozhaine area. We got additional updates. According to information we have, the Russians, as a result of offensive, managed to establish control over the road that connects Staromayorsk and Rovnopol, and to establish complete physical control. And we see that the Russians have already half encircled Staromayorsk from the south, from the west, and very likely the Russians will try to move further to the northern direction and to create a cauldron for the Ukrainians there. Currently, the Ukrainians have just one supply road from Makharovka, but this supply road is under complete Russian control. Very likely within the next few days, the Russians will restart their offensive on this direction with the purpose to return control over Makharovka, Staromayorsk, and Urozhaine. When talking about Robotyne, yet we haven't received any updates about any progress either from the Russian or from the Ukrainian side. The Ukrainians are saying that they managed to, let's say, repel Russian attacks, to counterattack, and to force the Russians to fall back to the southern part of Robotyne. The Russians are saying that they continue advancing further to the north. So the only thing we can tell for sure that we haven't received new geolocations confirming either Russian words or the Ukrainians. So we're going to keep the territory as is. The only thing thing we got is how the Russians were bombing the former prison on the southern part of Mala Takhmachka. The Ukrainians were using or are using these territories as the base and command center. Now we are moving to Kherson direction. As we discussed in the previous updates, the Ukrainians conducted unsuccessful special operation in direction of the spit of this, not Kinburn, this is Tendra spit, but that attack was discovered by the Russians and the entire crew was destroyed. 25 losses had the Ukrainians as a result of attack. Furthermore, we got very interesting updates from Krynkim. During the previous 24 hours, after the Ukrainians lost the foothold inside of the village, they made lots of attempts to create the foothold once again, and today they sent significant number of boats, probably with the purpose to return control over the lost foothold, but most of the boats were discovered by the Russians and destroyed in the river. So the Ukrainian attempt to open the Krynki foothold once again failed as under the Russian pressure and the Russian fire. Now let's move to some political events, some political updates. We got a lot of very interesting information. MI6, the United Kingdom intelligence, provided the Ukrainians information that the Russians have already finished or about to finish the creation of four attack corps, military corps. Currently, it's very difficult to understand the number of forces, but obviously the level of the number of forces is very big. And according to MI6, the Russians are planning to start offensive. This is going to be a spring offensive, and the main purpose of the Russians to establish control over additional regions and to have better positions before the upcoming negotiations that obviously will take place by the end of the spring, somewhere in the beginning of June. So this is the situation. Furthermore, let's say in the same time with this piece of news, we got some more details and clarifications from France. France is going to send forces to Ukraine, but according to them, they're planning to use forces just to protect borders, to make some police, let's say, job, but to train Ukrainian soldiers and so on. But we understand that obviously France is going to send their forces to the line of combat contact. Maybe not in the first day of their presence in Ukraine, but obviously in a month or maybe in two. Also, the Ukrainians and NATO countries are planning to use this case to have a better negotiation positions before upcoming negotiations. But it's a very difficult situation with France, United Kingdom and Germany. Now we see that there is a conflict between Germany, between Olaf Scholz, Rishi Sunak and Emmanuel Macron. And the thing is that Scholz today provided significant number of very interesting updates and details. For example, today the German Chancellor Olaf Scholz has revealed that British military personnel have been sent to Ukraine as a part of highly classified missions to aid Ukrainian forces in operating British Storm Shadows missiles against Russian targets. Scholz has since been strongly criticized by the UK and German oppositions for abuse of intelligence. So you know that this is a very important case and important note. Today in the morning we just discussed the conflict between Scholz and Macron. We know that Scholz every single day send another military package to Ukraine. So nobody can tell anything against Germany when talking about the question of support of Ukraine. Now Germany is probably the only country that has some schedule, some graphic, and they send because they have some obligations regarding the situation in the world and regarding the friendship with Russia that used to be in the past. They're doing everything that they're committed on. But when talking about France, they still haven't sent anything. And today Macron reported about sending the forces. So there is a real conflict between them. So we'll see what is going to be in the end. But anyway, we see that Scholz, by these two, let's say, statements, we conflict with Macron and, let's say, report about United Kingdom, made few steps back from this union of France-United Kingdom union and made one step towards Russia. So he provided a lot of information about attacks of Russian objects by United Kingdom officers. It's a very, very big piece of news, you know, and it's very difficult to understand how it's going to finish by the end, in the end of all. When talking about Russia, of course, the situation is not just stable, the situation is beautiful, we can say. The Russians continue production Su-34, probably this is going to be the next, the most massive type of aircrafts. Probably this is the strongest and most, strongest and reliable machine currently the Russians have, because they're building them endlessly. Also, we have updates about the Russians are planning to resume production of A-50 long-range radar detection and control aircrafts. The Russians complete production of another batch of BMP, the third model. Furthermore, we got today the Putin speech, and Putin today told a lot of things. And for example, his statement that Russia's strategic nuclear forces are in state of full readiness, and also bragged that these Zircon Sea-based hypersonic strike complex, which has already been delivered to the Russian armed forces, has already been used. These are hints to the West. In addition, the Sarmat complex has been delivered to the troops, and Putin told us that Russia demonstrate it soon. It's a nuclear weapon, to be more precise. And I can't even imagine how Russia can demonstrate the nuclear weapon. Maybe Macron is going to find out very soon with his forces in the western part of Ukraine, and he will share with us this information. Maybe. Anyway, sooner or later we'll see, because if Putin told us this, probably he will do this. And he also reported a lot of important notes about the situation, special military operation, and so on. So we'll see what is going to be next. And that's it for today. Military Summer channel reminds you to condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes to my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.